Well, good afternoon. Before we begin, I just want to thank you so much. Today has been absolutely incredible. And I'm sure you hear this all the time, that when the speakers are invited to come and encourage the congregation, it's often the speaker that leaves encouraged. And I've only been here one day, and I'm already there. I definitely had some of the best brisket I've ever had today. And I live in Alabama, where that's like home of the barbecue, but what y'all do is different. It is so good. So good. And I know that I'm going to gain like 20 pounds this week, so I'm just coming to grips with that, and it's all good. It's all good. But sincerely, thank you so much for letting me come and to trust me with this. It's a big deal, and I'm thankful for that. Tonight, in continuing in our theme that we started talking about this morning, obviously we've already discussed the goodness of God as our key hymn for this week, and that was really the thing that sparked all of these lessons. Adam and Tiffany Shanks, who direct Alabama Camp, were there that rainy day when we decided to sing the goodness of God and record it with our campers in it. I know it affected them the same way that it affected me. And because in every aspect of life, this morning we talked about sharing the gospel and seeing the goodness of God and sharing the gospel. And then we talked about His goodness running after us and how that even in times when it's unpleasant, His goodness is present. And tonight I want to delve a little further into that and talk about struggle, what we just sang about. That we have a promise from God, and the times that we struggle and the times that we undergo trials, that God is still there. His goodness has never left us. We only have to have, again, eyes that see, not just eyes that look. We have to want to see it. We have to choose to see it. But more than that, we have to learn from it. And that's really what I want to get into tonight. The second verse in that song says, I love your voice. You've led me through the fire. How many in here can relate to that? I know that we all can in some way. Let me ask you this. What makes being married good? And that's kind of an open-ended question, I know, but what makes being a parent good? What makes being a part of anything worthwhile good? And I'll tell you that if you've been married long enough, you've been a parent long enough, or a part of anything worthwhile long enough, there's a common connector. The common connector in all those things, in marriage, in parenting, or anything worthwhile, the common connector is struggle. Struggle is what makes those things good. Some of the best times that my wife Kelly and I ever had were when we were young and struggling. Barely having enough to pay bills sometimes. I don't know if you can believe this or not, considering that you can go to McDonald's now and spend $20 on yourself. I can remember a time where that was our grocery budget. We could go to Kroger, and for $20, we could eat all week. Now, we didn't eat extravagantly. We certainly didn't have smoked brisket. But we would eat on $20 a week. That was our grocery budget. Was there stress? Absolutely. Were there fights? Absolutely. Was there making up? Absolutely. You better believe it. But what we didn't realize all the while is that we're struggling and we're going through these things, we're drawing closer together. The struggle brought us closer because you realize that you're not in the fight alone. You've got someone with you, and there's goodness in that. There's goodness to know that you're not alone in the struggle, that you're not in the fight by yourself, and that is the good stuff. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. Because then you become a parent. And now you have a little more money, but you have a lot more responsibility. And so the scales are still tipped against you. They're still working against you. Christmas ain't about you anymore, is it? But young guys, don't ever believe the line that says, let's not get anything for each other for Christmas this year. That's a trap. You better get her something anyway. Because I did that. And then I'm at the gas station on Christmas Day looking for something to get her. Because I felt about this big whenever I got the present that wasn't from her, but it was from our daughter. It's a trick. It's a trick. But more than that, you got a 5-year-old daughter that needs new clothes for school. So you sacrifice the new pair of jeans that you need because her needs are greater than yours. Or your 3-year-old son has severe asthma and he needs a nebulizer and medication that insurance doesn't totally pay for, so that new jacket that you needed for your outside job is going to have to wait because his asthma is more important than you being cold. His needs are greater than yours. And so all of your wants and your needs take a back seat to theirs so they can be in the front seat. And that is the good stuff. You know, and it's funny, even now, like my kids are nearly grown. My daughter's 24, my son is 17. My adult daughter gets the stomach bug and spends a few days at our house sick because she can't take care of her son, and we need to do that. And then by proxy, we get sick because we're taking care of the sick. But you gladly jump up and ask, what else can I get you, baby? What do you need? Because in some small way, you're thankful that she still needs her mom and dad. Or my 17-year-old son calls me after work and says, Dad, my battery's dead. And so I jump up and I go charge the battery. That's just what you do. Those are the good things. Those are the good times. It's not inconvenient. It's not inconvenient. Hard times are what make the good times. And it's because they stand out. And that's not exactly what I mean, but I mean the struggle is the thing that takes the ordinary and makes it extraordinary because of the connections that are made in the midst of it and the unity that is forged in the lessons the fight teaches us. And that is the good stuff. And so I've said it enough. That's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about seeing the good in the struggle. This is a lesson about the wilderness, Gethsemane, and Judas, to be specific. And it's because there's something magical about the struggles that we sometimes face and what they do for us. And maybe too often, as Christians, we focus on the struggles we fight too much in the negative. We look at the struggle as a negative thing, and it's not to say that we're to be happy that someone is struggling or to wish that upon anyone. But doesn't the Lord's brother James say, right at the beginning of his epistle, count it all joy when you encounter trials of various kinds? He doesn't say pretend to be joyful. He doesn't say put on a happy face. He doesn't say put on a fake smile and just forge on through. He says count it as joyful. Count it as joyful. This is a financial term. To say count it is a financial term, and it means to evaluate or determine. To evaluate how we look at trials and then determine that they are beneficial, that they are indeed the good stuff. Not because they're pleasurable. As I said this morning, sometimes God's goodness is uncomfortable. And we looked at Joseph and the struggle that he had and where he said, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. We need to see sometimes that our struggles are the same way because of what they add to us. Look at what James goes on to say. He says, count it all joys, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. Do you see that? Struggle produces things. Struggle gives you stuff. The testing of your faith produces steadfastness. How important is that to you? It's easy to have faith when things are going my way. It's easy to have faith whenever things are joyful, but James says count it as joy when they're not. See the goodness in trials. See the goodness in being tested because they give you things. Steadfastness. And it'll make me perfect and complete. And this concept is not new with James. He learned it from his brother. Just like Peter did in 1 Peter 5 verse 10. He says, and after you have suffered a little while, the God of all grace who has called you to this eternal glory in Christ will himself restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish you. After you've suffered, you're going to get some things. After you've suffered a little while, things are going to happen. The good things are going to happen. It's not just things are going to happen, but good things are going to happen and strengthen you and establish you and restore you. Paul says the same thing in 2 Corinthians 12. He said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. This is when Paul begged God to take the thorn, and God's like, nope. You need to suffer with that for a little while. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, Paul speaking, I will boast all the more gladly of my weakness, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then, I'm content with weakness, insults, hardships, persecutions, calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Man, that is the good stuff. That's what Paul's saying here. And John says the same thing. I, John, your brother and partner in the tribulation and the kingdom, and the patient endurance that are in Jesus, was on the island of Patmos on account of the word of God and the testimony in Jesus. He wasn't there on vacation, by the way. This was prison. This was hardship. This was a struggle. John was living in a cave. That's not a good time. But they all learned this from the one who struggled more than all. Yet they counted these things as good. They counted them as joyful. And it's because of the good that it produced. And because of the good that they still produce. Jesus faced many struggles in his short life, but most notably there are three. And so I want us to look in Matthew chapter 4 for a minute. In the wilderness. Matthew chapter 4. The first 11 verses. Man, I love hearing pages turn. I love the digital Bible as much as anyone, but there's something about pages turning that I love to hear. In Matthew chapter 4, verse 1 says, Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And after he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. Then the tempter approached him and said, If you are the Son of God, then tell these stones to become bread. And he answered, It is written, man must not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes out of the mouth of God. Then the devil took him to the holy city and had him stand on the pinnacle of the temple. And he said to him, If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down. For it is written, He will give His angels orders concerning you, and they will support you with their hands, so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. And Jesus told him, It is also written, Do not test the Lord your God. Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. And he said to him, I will give you all of these things if you will fall down and worship me. And Jesus told him, Go away, Satan, for it is written, Worship the Lord your God and serve only him. And then the devil left him, and angels became to minister him. Not only is Jesus' humanity tested here, but his resolve, his authority, his very station with God as Lord are tested. They're put on display as Satan tempts him with things that he may possibly want to have, like power and position, but with something that he needs: food. Think about that for a second. Jesus was perfectly human, but he's perfectly God too. But being human, he needed food, especially after 40 days. I mean, listen, after 40 minutes, I'm already thinking about it. 40 days without food. When it says he was hungry, that's such an understatement. Jesus needed food. Yeah, he might have been interested in power and position and all that, but he tempted him with something that he needs. And most often our struggles aren't about the things that we want, but about the things that we can't have. Things that would maybe make our lives better, but things that we need, like money. Not many other things in this world can cause you problems like the lack of money can, except having a lot of it. And oh yes, you better believe that having wealth can bring just as many problems and just as much trouble to your door as not having it. Maybe not dressed the same, but all the same trouble underneath. Only one thing can bring that kind of trouble, and that's love, especially the lack of it. Love and money are the two main cited reasons for divorce in this country. This morning in the first lesson, we talked about statistics revolving around divorce. And listen, I understand it happens. And this is not a condemnation of anyone who's been divorced, because God definitely allows it for certain reasons. But money and troubles. Money troubles and love troubles. Struggles come, and instead of running to each other, many run away from each other. And they run into someone else. And before you know what happened, it's over. And so you find yourself lost in a wilderness, similar to what Jesus is experiencing here. Not the same thing, but it starts by something so small. Maybe there's a gesture at home between a married couple that's rejected. And so someone goes to bed with hurt feelings. And hurt feelings become bigger. They become then resentment. And time passes, and before long, the cold side of the marriage bed is no longer the side where anyone sleeps. Because usually you're cuddled up. But there's a big space there now that's growing bigger because you don't cuddle anymore at all. This type of fasting isn't voluntary. And before you know it, you're starved for attention, starved for some sort of connection. And if we're being honest, starved for something that you need. And here comes Satan with his eyes fixed on you, and so subtly says through a soft, gentle voice from someone who was not your spouse, and says, if you were mine, you would never feel like that again. And that sounds so good because it's been so long since someone was nice to you or shown you any attention or interest. Subtly tempting you with the most basic of human needs. What do? Do you give in? Do you give up all the equity and time that you've built into making the family that you have a home? For a line that, though it may sound good at the moment, you know in your heart of hearts is a lie? Or do you fight? Do you fight your way out of the wilderness that you found yourself in? Do you remember that vow that you made to God and your spouse that for better or worse, and like Joseph in the Old Testament, you run for your life back home where you belong and start doing the work to try to close the gap that's grown in your bed and rekindle that fire as the temptation tries to blow it out. You rekindle that loving fire and burn this wilderness and its temptation to ashes. Man, that is the good stuff. I've seen it. I've seen couples that the gap between them and the bed had grown so big it might as well have been the bed itself. And I've seen them come back together, and I've seen them do the work and to fight. And man, there's goodness in that. Don't let Satan have his way. That is the good stuff. All of us will find ourselves in those woods at some point. But remember that Jesus faced it too, and with God and his word, you can resist the temptation of Satan and what he comes to kill you with, because make no mistake, that's what he wants. He wants you dead spiritually. Remember I said this morning, he asked Eve, did God really say you'd die? Satan wants nothing more than you dead. Make no mistake, he hates us. And he wants us in the wilderness. But more than that, more than tempted, Jesus also felt lonely. This is probably the saddest thing to me. And maybe it's just the way that I read it, but even worse than being tempted, Jesus felt lonely and anxious. Look at Matthew chapter 26. Matthew chapter 26. In verse 36, it says, Then Jesus came with them to a place called Gethsemane. He told the disciples, Sit here while I go over there and pray. Taking along Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, he began to be sorrowful and troubled. And he said to them, I am deeply grieved to the point of death. Remain here and stay awake with me. Going a little farther, he fell face down and prayed, My Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will. And then he came back to the disciples and found them sleeping. And he asked Peter, Couldn't you stay awake with me 1 hour? Stay awake and pray so that you won't enter into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And so again, a second time he went and he prayed, My Father, if this cannot pass, unless I drink it, your will be done. And he came again and found them sleeping because they could not keep their eyes open. And after leaving them, he went away again and prayed a third time, saying the same thing once more. And then he came to the disciples and said to them, Are you still sleeping and resting? See, the time is near. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up. Let's go. My betrayer is near. How hard is the struggle when you know you're alone? You know, most of us all have someone. If it's not your spouse, it could be a parent or a best friend, but most of us all have someone that when we're going through it, whatever it is, we have someone. We have someone to go through it with us. How hard is it when you don't? How unbearable. Because it can be unbearable sometimes when you have support, but how much more without? And even more so when you're surrounded by people, but you're completely alone. You know, I think sometimes we miss that. That again, that if we have eyes that only look and don't see, we miss people that might even be here that are so lonely. They're surrounded by people, but they feel isolated and they have no one. This is Jesus in Gethsemane. He's there with his disciples. He's there with his inner circle even. He's like, hey, you guys, pray and watch for me, all right? I'm going to go over here and I'm going to pray. And they couldn't stay awake. He's there with his circle and they don't understand. How could they understand? How could they know what he was wrestling with and struggling with at this moment when they couldn't even watch his back? Jesus couldn't even go and pray with the comfort of knowing that they had his back. Anybody could have come up and they would have been asleep. They would have missed it. How alone he must have felt. Knowing what he has to face, knowing what's in front of him, and knowing that even his best friends aren't there. They're not there for him. But it gets worse. Pick up there in verse 47. While he was still speaking. So remember in verse 46 it says, get up, let's go see, my betrayer is near. While he's saying that, Judas, one of the 12, suddenly arrived. A large mob with swords and clubs with them, and the chief priests and elders of the people. His betrayer had given them a sign. The one I kiss, he's the one, arrest him. So immediately he went up to Jesus and said, greetings, Rabbi, and kissed him. Friend, Jesus asked him, why have you come? And then look at verse 56. But all this has happened so that the writings of the prophets would be fulfilled. And then all the disciples deserted him and ran away. All of his friends deserted him and ran away. Here comes another one of your best friends to add the ultimate insult to your ultimate injury and betrays you for gain. And if it couldn't get any worse, everyone that you asked to watch your back while you were sleeping, to have your back, to protect you, has physically left you as well. There are few things more hurtful than being unloved and being lonely, but being betrayed is definitely one of them, if not the one above all. And as Christians, we will face all three of these like Jesus did. We will face the wilderness of temptation when we sometimes are tempted not just with our wants but our needs. And we will face the loneliness of Gethsemane when there seems to be no one who has our back. And we will face also the betrayal by someone we love for some selfish reason of gain, or maybe because they were too tempted by some unmet need. But know this, and remember this, write it down. Leonard Ravenhill said, if we ever want to be like Jesus, then we must remember that he too had a wilderness, a Gethsemane, and a Judas. And we should expect the same if we, like Paul, are to imitate Christ. It's going to happen. No one is exempt from the worst that Satan can throw at them. And if Jesus himself wasn't exempt, then we should expect the same trials. We should expect then also the same results. In 2 Peter chapter 1, Peter says, when we by faith resist the temptations of Satan's wilderness, we gain by faith strength, virtue, and self-control as Peter prescribed in 2 Peter chapter 1. Look there. He says, for if you practice these qualities, you will never fail, or you will never fall, depending on your translation. What qualities? What qualities could he be talking about? He said his divine power in verse 3 has given us everything required for life and godliness through the knowledge of him who called us by his own glory and goodness. By these he has given us very great and precious promises, so that through them you may share in the divine nature, escaping the corruption that is in the world because of evil desire. For this very reason, make every effort to supplement your faith with goodness, and with goodness with knowledge, and knowledge with self-control, and self-control with endurance, and endurance with godliness, and godliness with brotherly affection, and brotherly affection with love. For if you possess these qualities and are increasing in measure, they will keep you from being useless or unfruitful in the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. The person who lacks these things is blind and short-sighted and has forgotten the cleansing of his past sins. Therefore, brothers and sisters, make every effort to confirm your calling and election, because if you do these things, you will never stumble. Strength. Through trials, through the struggle, the goodness of God is in the strength that we receive. When you go to the gym and work out, the weights are heavy. They're supposed to be. It's supposed to be hard. That's what makes you stronger. And Peter says, expect to get stronger then by these things. Expect yourself to get stronger. Expect something in return. There's a trade-off for your struggle. There's something that you get for it. In Psalm 34, which was quoted this morning, we can find ourselves in Gethsemane's loneliness like Jesus, and we can find comfort in the Father by prayer in our moments like Jesus of doubt, and find comfort in knowing that God hears us and answers those prayers in his time, his way. Verse 6 of Psalm 34 says, this poor man cried, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all of his troubles. I told you this morning I love the word all, because when he says all, exactly what troubles does that leave out? 0. The Lord saved him out of all of his troubles. Of all of his troubles. There's comfort in that. That when I struggle, I can take comfort that I can cry out to my God and he will hear. And when we find ourselves caught in the spirit of Judas' betrayal, through heartache, through heartbreak, through tears, we forgive. You know, it's betrayal. Not because Judas was Jesus' enemy. We expect that kind of thing from our enemy, but when it's someone you love, man, it goes right through you. And the sad reality of that is someone is going to betray you at some point in your life. And guess what? You probably also will betray somebody. And on either side of that is this beautiful thing that we get to emulate Christ and ask for and offer forgiveness. Through heartbreak, through heartache, through tears. We forgive. Though Judas never asked for Jesus' forgiveness, we do see that he was remorseful even in his action. He gave the money back. You might say that he was trying to repent. He wanted to give the money back that he betrayed Jesus for. And though this is simply my own supposition and not a doctrine of any kind, I want to put that out there. I don't want an email written about me. I'd like to believe that when Jesus said those beautiful last words, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do, Judas might have been included in that. I don't know that. But what a beautiful thought that would be. But I know this. Even if he didn't, I can extend forgiveness to those who betray me because it will set me free from the burden of bitterness and restore me to a spirit of joy. Amen. Even in trials, even in my wilderness, even in my Gethsemane and in my Judas, that is some good stuff. That is some good stuff. They say that life is 5% of what happens to us, while the other 95% is how we deal with it. I've lived long enough to know that's true. That 95% is the good stuff. 23 years ago, Kenny Chesney released a song called The Good Stuff. And without reciting the whole song, it focused on an older man giving a younger man some insight about his despair over his first fight with his new bride. And the conclusion was this: that love, life, and pain were all of the ingredients of a good life. Love, life, and pain. And the dichotomy of that is this: love and pain are the only two real things that we experience. And all the others are just byproducts of those two. But if the cost of love is the knowledge that someday I will lose that, then I will gladly pay it every time for the experience of something real and something pure. Love's not love till you give it away. And nothing hurts like love lost. But even then, it's something truly good. And as Christians, we get to do that every day. Embrace your struggles. Count them as joy, for they are truly the good stuff. I hope that I've said something useful to you tonight. I hope that you've seen that God exists in the storm, that he's there for us even in the midst of our trials, and that he does hear us when we cry out. And so if you're here tonight and you're in it, whatever it is, you're in it, and you need help, cry out and he'll answer. It may not be the answer you're looking for, and it may not be right now, but God hears his people. And so if you need to become a Christian tonight, you can do that. You can repent of your sins and be baptized for the remission of those sins. And if you just need to come home, like the father of the prodigal, God stands far off and he won't beg you, but I will. Come forward while we stand and sing a song.